My name is Arthur Finch. I'm 78 years old, and last year I stopped going to church for the first time in my life. And that's when I finally found God. I know how that sounds. Let me explain. For most of my life, I thought I was a good man. I sat in the same pew every Sunday. I sang the hymns. I took communion. I thought that was the deal. You show up, you're seen, you earn your grace. It was a transaction. I was wrong. Honestly, I was a coward. I judged everyone from that comfortable seat. I thought the ritual was the point. I didn't know it then, but I was hiding. Let me tell you what happened. It started on a perfectly normal Sunday. I was in my usual spot, third pew from the front on the left. The wood was polished smooth. I was listening to the sermon, but not really. My eyes landed on the back of an old man's head, Harold Miller. We'd shared that pew for 50 years, and seeing his thin white hair, it hit me like a punch. A memory I'd buried. I was 25 again. We worked at the factory together. Harold's wife was sick. He was tired. He made a small mistake in the books. I saw it. I could have helped him fix it. But I wanted a promotion, so I told the foreman. Harold was fired. I got his job. I got promoted. I sat in church with him for 50 years after that and never said a word. Not one word of apology. The organ played the final hymn, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was the silence in that factory office from 1953, Harold's face falling. I stood up. I walked right out of that church. I didn't know it then, but I was never going back. The next Sunday, I stayed home. My wife, Eleanor, passed 5 years ago. The house was so quiet. I felt like a fraud. My whole routine was gone. I was lost. I wandered around, touching her things, her vase, her gardening hat. I ended up in the spare room. There was an old box labeled Dad's Things. I hadn't opened it since he died. I found a letter. It had my name on it, in my father's handwriting. He was a deacon, a strict man. My hands shook. I opened it. It was short. He wrote it just before he died. It said, "Arthur, I have worn the suit of a faithful man my whole life. It is hollow. I fear I love the appearance of goodness more than goodness itself. Do not make my mistake. Find the substance." I dropped the paper. My whole world cracked. My father, my example. He felt like a fraud, too. I spent a week in a fog. The next Sunday, I didn't go to church. I just got in my car and drove. I ended up at the old river. I was just staring at the water, thinking about time. Then I saw a young man. He was in the river, trying to pull his dog out. The current was strong. I didn't think. My old knees hurt, but I waded in. I found a branch. We got the dog to shore. We were both soaked and muddy. He thanked me, his voice all shaky. He drove off with his dog. I looked down at my dirty pants. I felt real. For the first time in years, I felt useful. I was cold, so I stopped at a diner. I was a mess. A waitress named Maria brought me coffee and a towel. She had kind eyes. We talked. She works 2 jobs. Her son is autistic. She said, "My faith? It's just knowing the sun will come up and trying to be the reason someone else believes that too." When I left her a big tip. She took my hand and said, "God bless you, sir." That blessing, it felt warm. It felt true. That night, I didn't say my normal prayers. I just sat in the dark and whispered, "What now?" No voice answered, but I remembered Maria's tired, kind eyes. I bought a notebook. On the first page I wrote, Harold Miller. I wrote what I did. Then I wrote my father's name. Then more names. My sister Margaret. We fought over money and didn't speak for 10 years. My son David. I was too hard on him. A homeless man I walked past. Page after page. It was a list of my failures. It was awful. I just stared at it. Then one morning I circled Harold's name. I found his number in the phone book. He still lived here. I drove to his house. I stood on his porch. My heart was beating so loud. His wife answered. She called him. Harold came to the door. He looked old. He squinted at me. I couldn't remember my speech. I just said, "Harold, it's Arthur Finch from the factory. I came to apologize." I told him everything. The jealousy, the cowardice. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I just told him the truth. He was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed. He said, "I wondered if you ever would." He didn't say he forgave me. He just said, "Come in, the coffee's fresh." We sat in his kitchen. We didn't talk about church. We talked about our lives, our wives. It was the most honest hour I've ever had. That gave me a little courage. I called my sister. It was hard. She was cold at first. I wrote a long letter to my son. I started volunteering at the food pantry, just lifting boxes. I met a young man there named Leo. He was talking about his past. He said, "I got clean when I stopped asking God to take the craving away and just started showing up to help someone else." That sentence hit me. It changed my question. It wasn't what now anymore. It became, who needs me today? And the answer was never in a hymn book. It was right in front of me. Months later, I went back to St. Bartholomew's. It was a Tuesday afternoon, empty. I sat in my old pew. I felt nothing for it, no comfort, no pride. I looked at the cross and I finally understood. The building isn't God, it's just a symbol. I had worshiped the symbol. I had outsourced my goodness to 1 hour a week. As I was leaving, the sun came through the stained glass. It threw colors on the floor. I didn't see saints. I saw the color of Maria's apron. I saw the riverbank mud. I saw Harold's gray hair. I walked out. I wasn't running away. I was finally free. Now I'm in my garden, Eleanor's garden. My hands are in the dirt planting bulbs for spring. A feeling came over me. It wasn't a voice. It was a knowing. God wasn't in that pew. God was in the factory where I betrayed Harold. God was in my father's letter, in the muddy river, in the diner, in the hard apology on the porch. God is the pull to connect, the ache in your conscience, the courage to make things right. The truth is, God is in the messy, painful, beautiful work of being a human being. That's the truth no one wants to hear. You have to get your hands dirty. The bulb is in the ground now, covered up. It'll sleep through the winter. And I'm not afraid of the quiet anymore. So I started with the ledger. It was slow work, hard work. Some days I could only look at one name, my sister Margaret. We hadn't spoken in 10 years, not since our mother's will. I thought she was greedy. She thought I was controlling. We were both right and both wrong. I dialed her number 3 times before I let it ring. Her voice was cold. "Arthur?" I just said, "I'm sorry, Margaret, for everything. I was your big brother, and I failed you. She didn't say it was okay. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Thank you for saying that." It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a fix. But it was a start. A tiny crack of light. Writing to my son David was worse. I sat at the kitchen table for hours. I wrote about the baseball games I missed because of work. I wrote about how I criticized his art degree. I told him I was proud of the man he became, despite me. I mailed it. He didn't call. But a week later, I got a postcard in the mail. It was a painting of a tree. On the back, he wrote, "Got your letter, thank you. Let's talk soon." I cried. I'm not ashamed to say it. I cried at my kitchen table. The food pantry was where things got clear. I just lifted boxes. I didn't tell anyone my story. I didn't need to. I met Leo there, the young man who talked about his addiction. One day we were sorting cans of soup. He was having a bad day. He was shaky. He said, "Some days the old craving just sits on my chest." I didn't know what to say. So I just handed him another can. I said, "This one's chicken noodle. Looks good." He looked at me and he smiled. A real smile. He said, "Yeah, it does." And we kept working. That was it. No sermon, no lesson, just soup. And it felt holy. But the ledger wasn't done. There was a name that scared me more than Harold's. Eleanor, my wife. I put her on the list, and I didn't know what to write. I loved her. I know I did. But was I a good husband? I sat in our bedroom holding her pillow. I remembered all the Sunday mornings I'd rush her to get ready for church. I was more worried about being late than about talking to her. I remembered the time she'd want to just sit on the porch and watch the birds, and I'd say I was too busy. Busy with what? Committee meetings at church. Paperwork for the deacons. I was busy building my hollow suit, and I left her alone in our home. One afternoon, I went out to her garden. It was overgrown, weeds everywhere. I hadn't touched it since she died. I felt so guilty looking at it. I got down on my knees, right there in the dirt. I started pulling weeds. My back hurt. My fingers got dirty, but I kept going. I talked to her while I worked. I said, "I'm sorry, Ellie. I'm so sorry I was never really here." I cried again. The tears mixed with the dirt on my hands. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel alone in that garden. I felt like she was listening. Not in a magical way, just in a quiet, sure way. The garden was where she met God, I think. And finally, I was there too. I kept working in her garden. It became my new church. My hands were always dirty. But the ledger, there was one more name, the hardest one, my own, Arthur Finch. I didn't know what to write. How do you apologize to yourself for wasting a life, for being a stranger in your own skin? I was sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook open to that blank page. The house was so quiet. And it hit me, all at once, the full cost. It wasn't just Harold or Eleanor or David. It was me. I had lost myself. I traded my soul for a performance, for a pat on the back from people whose names I'd forget by Tuesday. I spent 78 years building a shell of a man, and now I was just an old man in a silent house with a list of regrets and dirt under his fingernails. I put my head down on the table. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was empty. I thought, this is it. This is the truth. There's no fixing this. You can't get those years back. The weight of it was physical. It sat on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I got up. I walked through the house, room to room. I saw the ghost of myself everywhere. The young man in a hurry. The middle-aged man worried about his reputation. The old man going through the motions. All of them were fakes. All of them were scared. I ended up in front of the hall mirror. I looked at my own face, the wrinkles, the old eyes, and I said it out loud to the reflection. I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry I was such a coward. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to be real. It sounded pathetic, but I meant it. That's when the phone rang. It startled me. It was Leo from the food pantry. His voice was tight. He said, Mr. Finch, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just, I'm having a really bad day. The craving, it's bad. And I didn't know who else to call. I didn't hesitate. I said, where are you? He was at the bus stop near the pantry. I said, stay right there, I'm coming. I drove over. He was sitting on the bench, head in his hands. He looked up when I pulled up. He looked so young and so tired. I got out. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat next to him on the bench. I didn't say anything. We sat there for a few minutes in silence. Then he said, I'm sorry, this is stupid. I said, no, it's not. And I meant it. You called. That's the brave thing. He looked at me. How do you do it? He asked. How do you live with all the things you've done wrong? The question hung in the air, and I knew the answer, the real answer. It wasn't in a book. It wasn't in a prayer. I said, you don't live with it, you live through it. You get up every day and you try to do one thing that isn't about you, even if it's small, even if it's just sitting on a bench with someone who's hurting. He nodded slowly. We sat a while longer. Then he said he thought he could go home. I drove him. When he got out, he said, thank you, Arthur. He used my name, not Mr. Finch. Arthur. It was the first time he'd said it. It felt like a gift. Driving home, I realized something. The ledger wasn't a life sentence. It was a map. It showed me where I'd been blind. And sitting on that bench with Leo, that was a new mark on the map, a different kind of mark. It wasn't an erasure. It was an addition. The cost was real. The lost years were real. But the bench was real too, and the quiet ride home. The cost was real. The lost years were real. But the bench was real too, and the quiet ride home. That's what I learned sitting there. You can't erase the marks on the ledger. You can't get the time back. But you can add new marks, different ones. The mark of a quiet bench on a bad afternoon. The mark of a planted bulb. The mark of a spoken apology, even if it's met with silence. That's where God is, in the addition, not in the erasure. I was wrong about so much. I thought God was a judge keeping score in a big book. I was the one keeping score, and I was a harsh judge. I thought faith was a fortress you built to keep the world out. It's not. It's a bridge you build to let the world in. The messy, complicated, hurting world. I thought loving Eleanor meant providing for her, and I did. But what she needed was for me to see her, to sit on the porch and watch the birds with her, to notice when her garden made her happy. I provided a house, but I was rarely home in it. Not really. Love isn't a provision, it's a presence. I thought being a good father meant making my son strong. I criticized him to toughen him up. All I did was teach him that his father's love was conditional on his choices. That was my greatest failure. Love doesn't toughen, it softens. It makes a safe space for someone to be who they are. I should have listened to him talk about art. I should have seen the courage it took for him to choose a different path. I was trying to build a version of myself, and I missed the beautiful man he already was. And my father, I thought he was my blueprint, a man of unwavering certainty. His letter broke that certainty, and for that I am finally grateful. He gave me his deepest truth with his last words. He showed me that the bravest thing a man can do is admit, even at the end, that he was afraid, that he got it wrong. His legacy wasn't his deacon's pin. It was that fragile, honest piece of paper. It was his permission for me to question everything. So here is my advice, for what it's worth from an old man. If you're my age or getting there, listen. Don't perform anymore. Just be there. Put down the scorecard. Your life is not a presentation. It's a conversation. A conversation with your past, with the people you've hurt, with the quiet spaces you've avoided. Start the conversation. It will be terrifying. Your heart will pound on the porch. Do it anyway. Buy the notebook. Write the first name. Not to wallow, to see, to make the invisible debt visible. Then, do the next right thing. It doesn't have to be grand. It almost never is. It's a phone call. It's showing up to lift boxes even when you're tired. It's sitting on a bench and saying nothing. It's planting a bulb you might not see bloom. These small, quiet things are the real liturgy, the real communion. You still have time. Maybe not decades, maybe not even years, but you have now. And now is enough. Now is where everything happens. Don't wait for a feeling of readiness. You'll never be ready. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing it scared. The hollow suit is comfortable, but it's a prison. The messy, muddy, honest life is hard, but it's free. And in that freedom, you'll hear it. Not a voice from a cloud, but the whisper of your own soul, finally breathing. That's the invitation. Not to a better church service, but to a better life. A truer life. This isn't where my story ends. It's where it finally began. And if this old man's confession meant anything to you, then maybe your beginning is here too. If you felt something listening to this, that quiet knock I talked about, then don't let the feeling fade when this video ends. Help it grow. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. It's not for me, it's for you. So the next time we share a story like this, a story about waking up, you won't miss it. It'll be a reminder in your notifications to stay awake. If this resonated, tap the like button. It's a small thing, but it tells me the message is getting through, that I'm not just shouting into the void. And more importantly, it tells the algorithm to show this to someone else who might be sitting in their own polished pew, waiting for a sign to leave it. But most importantly, comment. Tell me one thing. It doesn't have to be deep or dramatic. Just tell me, what's the first name that came to your mind while listening? Harold's name came to me in a church pew. What's yours? By writing it down here, even just a first name, you make it real. You take the first step out of the performance and into the truth. Let's have that conversation below. And if you know someone, a parent, a friend, a spouse, who is living in that hollow suit, who needs to hear that it's never too late to take it off, share this with them. Don't preach, just send it. Say, "This made me think of you in a good way." Be the quiet knock for someone else. For those who want to go deeper, there's a link below to a simple private form. You can send me your story. Not for publication, but just to tell someone. I read every one. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to say our truth out loud to a stranger. The act of writing it down is the first page of your own ledger. And finally, if you want to hold this idea in your hands, I've linked to a book below that helped me. It's not a religious text. It's a book about gardening of all things. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees. It taught me about connection, about quiet growth, about how things are linked beneath the surface in ways we can't see. Sometimes, truth comes in unexpected packages. My garden is waiting for me. The sun is getting low. There's always more work to do. But it's good work, real work. I finally understand what my father meant. Find the substance. It's not in the symbols we build. It's in the soil we touch, the hands we hold, the apologies we whisper, and the quiet bench we offer to a struggling soul. That's the cathedral. That's where God lives. And the door is always open. You just have to walk out of the one you've locked yourself inside.